Some nights are like that, they show you how a simple plan can spiral completely out of control. That night was exactly one of those nights. When David said, "I want you to look stunning tonight," I should have known it was going to be more than just an ordinary evening. But I didn't, or maybe I didn't want to, because by the end of that night, everything I thought I knew about myself, my feelings, and where I was headed in life would change forever. Standing in front of the mirror in my short black skirt and red blouse, I took one last look at myself. My wavy hair cascaded over my shoulders, and the crimson lipstick on my lips seemed to glow. I'd made an effort, as I always did, to see the admiration in David's eyes. He stood next to me, looking as dashing as ever in his suit. "You look amazing, Emily," David said, leaning in to plant a soft kiss on my neck. The approval in his eyes gave me a little more confidence. Tonight is going to be unforgettable. Unforgettable. Maybe he was right, but what David meant by unforgettable, and what I'd later come to define it as, were two entirely different things. Anthony and Carl were David's childhood friends. Since Harley and Ivy had come into the picture, the six of us had tried to plan group hangouts whenever possible, but this meetup felt different. I remembered how carefree David used to be with them, how they'd laugh and joke effortlessly. Now they were all adults with spouses and responsibilities, but the bond between them hadn't faded. Just hearing Anthony's name sent a strange unease rippling through me. His charisma was overwhelming. Anthony wasn't someone you could forget after meeting him. His tall frame, sharp features, and eyes that always seemed to be holding onto a secret carried an air of dangerous allure. Even with Harley by his side, Anthony's presence had a way of changing the atmosphere in a room, and tonight I was about to breathe in that air. When we met outside the bar, I could feel Anthony's gaze on me as soon as he saw me. Harley was elegantly hooked onto his arm, but his piercing eyes trailed over me. I straightened up and smiled, trying to steady the fluttering in my chest. "Emily, you look stunning," Anthony said, his voice softer than usual. His eyes drifted briefly to my legs, lingering just long enough to make me self-conscious of my short skirt. Even with David standing right beside me, the weight of Anthony's gaze made me uneasy. "Thank you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Harley laughed lightly at something Carl said, but Anthony's focus never wavered from me. As we gathered our drinks and sat down, Carl and Ivy were deep in animated conversation, their laughter ringing out over the music. David was right next to me, engrossed in the stories, oblivious to the fact that Anthony's attention was locked on me. Anthony, seated nearby, hadn't taken his eyes off me for a second. The silence between us felt louder than the laughter surrounding us, like a tension that only the two of us could sense. The unease within me grew stronger. Anthony's interest in me was almost tangible. When I shifted slightly, crossing my legs and adjusting my posture, I noticed how his eyes followed my every move. Realizing this, a wave of heat coursed through me. It wasn't just discomfort, it was something else, the thrill of being on the edge of something forbidden. "You're unusually quiet, Emily," Anthony said, taking a sip from his glass. His voice carried that familiar teasing low tone. "I remember you being much more talkative." "Sometimes it's nice to just listen," I replied, avoiding direct eye contact. But the faint smirk playing on his lips told me he knew I was losing control of the game. David got up to greet someone he recognized at another table, leaving me sitting there. Almost instantly, Anthony slid closer to me, his shoulder brushing against mine. I could feel his breath on my skin, warm and teasing. "You look absolutely stunning tonight, Emily," he murmured, his voice low and intimate. Having him so close was both thrilling and unsettling. My heart was racing, and all I could manage to say was, "Thank you." But deep down, I knew Anthony's proximity wasn't innocent. At that moment, I felt everything about this night beginning to shift. Anthony's gaze, his words, his nearness, they were drawing me in while simultaneously making me feel like I was teetering on the edge of something dangerous. This night, I realized, was going to be far longer than I had anticipated. Some nights aren't just nights, they're turning points, moments where everything changes. And if you've stuck with me this far, I know you're hooked. Join my channel, turn on notifications, and trust me, this is a story you don't want to miss. Sitting at the bar, the dim lighting and constant buzz of conversations and laughter were starting to weigh on me. David and Carl were lost in their nostalgic jokes, while Anthony, seated at another table, kept throwing glances my way. There was something about his gaze, a depth that seemed to trap me. Every time I wanted to avoid it, I realized how much this unspoken game between us was pulling me in. What was I feeling toward him? It was forbidden, wrong, yet undeniably alluring. I took a deep breath, trying to focus on my drink, but even as Anthony laughed at something David said, I could feel his eyes lingering on me. It unsettled me. Everyone was here, so close, and yet I felt isolated, exposed in a way I couldn't explain. David leaned over at one point, asking, "Are you having fun?" I forced a smile, replying of course, but he had no idea my mind was elsewhere. When he rejoined Carl and Harley, Anthony didn't waste a moment. He slid into the seat next to me, his presence palpable. "You look even more beautiful under these dim lights," he whispered. His voice was so deep and smooth that I momentarily forgot how to breathe. In that instant, I understood exactly what he was trying to do. "Anthony," I said, my voice trembling, "not here. Everyone's around." "This isn't the time," but he just smiled. Calm and self-assured, "No one will notice anything. I'm a professional," he said, as if it was a game he'd already mastered. Then, under the table, his hand lightly rested on my knee. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The surrounding noise, the laughter and chatter, it all faded. All I could hear was Anthony's voice, and the chaos inside me. I needed to get away to breathe. I stood up and headed toward the quieter hallway near the restrooms, but Anthony didn't let me escape. He followed. As I reached the narrow corridor, I suddenly felt his warm breath at the back of my neck. "You don't need to run," he murmured, his voice soft yet charged. "I just want to tell you something." I turned around to face him, and our eyes locked. The intensity in his gaze left me completely defenseless. "It's hard to hide what I feel for you," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. "Anthony, this isn't right," I replied, but my tone betrayed me. It was laced with guilt and a desire I couldn't deny. Anthony reached out slowly, his hand brushing against my cheek. "Maybe it's not right," he said softly, "but it's real." I realized I didn't want to hold back anymore. When he said those words, Anthony's lips slowly met mine. Anthony took a small step back, eyes locked on mine. "Will you come over to my place tonight?" he asked, his tone calm but totally confident. "We can keep having drinks, sure, but more importantly, we can actually finish this conversation." It was impossible not to catch the meaning behind his words. I dipped my head slightly and walked back to my room without saying anything. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking. How was the rest of the night going to go down? This connection with Anthony, as wrong as it felt, had completely taken hold of me. Anthony mingled for a while longer, enjoying himself with everyone, toasts, laughs, joining in the songs. All of us were really loosening up, especially David and the others. They were pretty much hammered, barely in control. When the room briefly fell silent, Anthony seized the chance. He set his glass on the table, stood up, and smiled around at everyone. "It's closing time here, but none of us want the night to end, right?" he said, voice steady and confident. For a second, people tried to figure out what he meant. Then he added, "Let's keep this going at the summer house. We can all hang out in a more chill spot and keep the night alive." Everyone immediately cheered at the idea. Even a wasted David yelled, "Hell yeah. The summer house would be awesome." Ivy and Harley started clapping like crazy in agreement. I glanced at Anthony, and he was looking right at me. At that moment, I got the feeling the summer house plan was really meant for someone else, me. "All right then," Anthony said with a grin. "We'll pile into our cars and head over there. Let's make this night unforgettable." Once we arrived at the summer house, everything fell into place just like Anthony. I planned the huge living room. Super modern, it got everyone's attention. Anthony immediately turned on some music and pointed at a table loaded with wine bottles. "Come on, let's keep the party going," he said. David, Carl, and the rest flopped down on the couches. They were so far gone with booze and exhaustion that they seemed completely out of it. Everyone was cracking up at jokes. Ivy and Harley clung to each other, singing along to the music. But Anthony and we were both totally sober. Anthony came over to me again. "Emily, you having fun?" he asked, not even trying to hide that look in his eyes. I tried to avoid his gaze. "Yeah, it's been a blast," I said, but the tension in my voice only made him move in closer. My head started spinning a bit, the alcohol had me feeling kind of woozy. I put my glass down on the table and staggered over toward David. "I think I need a bathroom break," I murmured, my voice low and shaky. "All this drinking is messing with my stomach. I need to clear my head." David tried to get up from the couch, but he was way too smashed. He gestured vaguely at me, saying, "I'll show you, Emily," then nearly face-planted without even taking a step. Anthony came over right then, calm and totally in control, like always. "David, stay put. I'll help Emily out," he said gently, taking hold of my arm. He turned to the others and said, "Guys, I'll get the terrace ready for you. Some fresh air under the night sky. Let's finish the night up there," he added. People in the living room seemed to approve, but deep down, I knew the terrace was probably already set, and Anthony was just using that as an excuse to take me upstairs. Anthony's hand gripped my arm and guided me upstairs, making my heart pound like crazy. Our footsteps echoed on the stairs, and inside me, a swirl of anxiety and excitement clashed. By now, I totally got what Anthony intended, but the weird part was I wasn't doing a damn thing to stop it. When we reached the top floor, we stopped in front of a big door. We opened it and stepped inside. While I gave the bedroom a quick once-over, Anthony came up behind me, quietly shut the door, and paused for a second. His eyes locked onto mine like he was trying to read every emotion I was hiding. The room was dead silent except for our breathing. We both knew what was about to happen, but it was like we were waiting for something to kick it off. Anthony took a slow step forward and set his hands on my waist. His touch was gentle, but I could feel this unstoppable pull under the surface. "Emily," he said, voice low and deep, "I can see what you really want. It's right there in your eyes. There's no point in denying it anymore." Anthony was, from head to toe, the perfect man. Broad shoulders, a strong stance, and that ultra-confident vibe that made him stand out the second he entered a room. His features were like something carved by a sculptor, sharp jawline, kind of stern but insanely attractive, eyes that almost worked like a spell on people. He hinted at secrets he kept buried deep. His hair, just a bit messy, gave him an extra dose of charm, and his smile was on another level entirely. It sank right into your soul, making you forget everything else. Being around him made me feel both special and vulnerable. Having a man this gorgeous pay attention to me fueled my pride but also sparked this hidden excitement. I tried to say something, but the words got stuck in my throat when his warm hands pulled me closer. My heart went even wilder the second his lips touched mine. It felt like time stopped. That kiss was like a wave unleashing everything I'd been pushing down, passionate and intense. The rush and the fear of getting caught clashed inside me, knocking down all my defenses as Anthony's hands traveled over my body, gently yet firmly. I totally lost control. I reached up and laid my hands on his broad shoulders, craving his warmth. A small gasp escaped my lips, proof of how strong his touch was affecting me. Everything sped up so fast, I had no hold on the situation anymore. My trembling hands started undoing my shirt buttons. When it slipped to the floor, the way Anthony's eyes roamed over me sent a thrill through every nerve. I went for the zipper on my skirt next, feeling his gaze burning into me the whole time. Those eyes made me bolder. I let myself fall onto the bed when Anthony leaned toward me. My eyes locked onto his face. Inside, I felt a mix of loneliness and guilt on one side and an uncontrollable excitement on the other. His touch awakened a warmth in my body that I hadn't felt in a long time. In that moment, there were only the two of us in the world, no David, no laughter coming from downstairs, just us and the forbidden pull between us. Anthony leaned over me, running his hands through my hair, then placing one hand on my waist. He slowly continued sliding his hands downward. "Tonight it's just you and me," he said, his voice soft yet firm. My heart was racing, and the passion and excitement I felt had reached its peak. I felt something huge inside me. Everything was moving so fast, Anthony was rushing too, trying not to get caught. It was the first time I had done something this risky and forbidden. I was unbelievably excited, feeling entirely different. Before long, my whole body trembled and tensed up. I almost felt like I was going to pass out. In that moment, the forbidden nature of it only intensified the pull between us. Downstairs, just a few meters away, David and the others were there, but even the weight of that danger couldn't stop us. We kept going, and I felt like I might be falling in love with Anthony. Up close, Anthony felt so different. Suddenly, I said, "We have to hurry, Anthony. This is great, but it can't go on any longer." Anthony, with that self-assured manner, replied, "Don't worry, Emily. It'll be fine." And we continued. Before long, both of us gave into our bodies and it ended. We were both out of breath and flushed. I could see both our bodies. We were both extremely excited. I was picking up my clothes off the floor in a hurry, still gasping for breath when I realized it. My heart was pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest, but a slight smile played on my lips. I turned to Anthony, trying to keep my whirlwind of emotions under control. "Everything is really good," I said, my voice still a bit shaky but warm. "Now go downstairs and make sure everything's cool, all right? Once you get everybody out on the terrace, I'll join you." Anthony nodded with that reassuring look of his. "Sure, Emily, I've got it under control. I'll be waiting for you," he said. There was this calmness in his voice that eased me a bit, but his eyes still carried the echo of what we'd done tonight. I headed to the bathroom and took a deep breath. The second I closed the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes still showing the impact of everything that had happened tonight. Tonight would stay a secret, but the rush of that forbidden feeling was still echoing inside me. By the time I pulled myself together and got out to the terrace, everyone was still laughing and drinking. Anthony stood off to one side waiting, but I acted like nothing was up and went over to sit next to David. I raised my glass toward him, smiling. "Let's finish the night together, okay?" I said. David, drunk but happy, nodded and lifted his glass back at me. That night I drank until I was wasted up on the terrace under the stars. I curled up beside David and drifted off, my mind still brimming with those moments. The weight and excitement of what happened kept echoing inside me. Was it just a one-night secret, or the start of something way bigger? Only time would tell. If you've made it this far, I know my story hit you deep. There's so much more to share, and you really don't want to miss a thing. Smash that follow button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment about this story.